They say, when the winter grows long and the cold bites deeper than your bones, something ancient stirs in the northern woods. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't sleep. It only hungers. Tonight, we're not just telling ghost stories around the fire. We're stepping into the shadows of indigenous myth, into the icy grip of a creature that feeds on fear, isolation, and flesh. A spirit born of starvation, a monster carved from human desperation. Its name is whispered by elders and buried in snowbound legend. This is Project Black Garden, a Monsters and Myths podcast. Season 3, The Lotus Files. File number 363. The story of the Wendigo. I'm your host, Michael, and I'm here to tell one of those stories. Because unfortunately, most do not survive to share their experience. The Wendigo comes from the folklore of several Algonquin-speaking indigenous peoples, including the Cree, the Innu, and American folklore. The Wendigo is a malevolent, cannibalistic spirit associated with winter, the north, famine, and sometimes greed. In many stories, a human becomes a Wendigo after committing cannibalism, especially in desperate times like during winter starvation. Some tales also say a person can become a Wendigo by being possessed by the spirit. The Wendigo is not just a monster, but a cautionary symbol of unchecked greed, selfishness, and the taboo of consuming human flesh. While descriptions vary, indigenous accounts often depict the Wendigo as emaciated and gaunt, with rotting skin pulled tightly over its bones, tall and skeletal with glowing eyes and an insatiable hunger. Rotting flesh, possibly with icicles or frost on its body, reflecting its wintry nature. Some modern interpretations give it deer-like antlers or a skull face, but these are not traditionally accurate to original indigenous myths. In historical records, especially from early European settlers and missionaries, there are reports of a condition called Wendigo psychosis, a cultural syndrome marked by intense cravings for human flesh and fear of becoming a cannibal. This is now a controversial and largely discredited diagnosis. The Wendigo serves as a spiritual warning against violating natural and communal laws, especially the balance between need and greed. In literature, Algernon Blackwood's 1910 short story, The Wendigo, helped introduce the creature to Western horror. The modern portrayals often amplify the creature's physical monstrosity, but stray from its cultural roots. Many indigenous activists and scholars criticize how modern portrayals distort the Wendigo myth and strip it of its original spiritual and cultural significance. Encounters with the deadly Wendigo have been around for eons. In traditional indigenous tales, Wendigo encounters often happen deep in the forest during winter, when isolation and hunger make people most vulnerable. A hunting party goes missing, only for a lone survivor to return months later, changed, gaunt, strange, yet silent. Elders say he had been possessed by the Wendigo spirit after consuming his fallen comrades. His eyes no longer blink. He craves flesh. Soon, others begin to vanish from the village. Some communities believed a suspected Wendigo could be exposed by fire. If the person screams and flees uncontrollably, it reveals their possession. In some stories, a person begins to grow unnaturally tall and gaunt until their heart is encased in ice and they must be destroyed by burning. Wendigo attacks are rarely direct like a werewolf or vampire. Instead, the horror often builds slowly, psychologically. Trappers and hunters report hearing footsteps in deep snow, but always behind them. They're never visible. When they turn to look, the tracks vanish or continue in impossible directions, such as up trees, onto rooftops, down cliffs. Eventually, a member of the party disappears, and only bloody snow and claw marks remain. Survivors of Wendigo encounters describe hearing voices in the woods, mimicking the cries of loved ones. When followed, the voice leads the victim deep into the wilderness, where they are never seen again, or are found weeks later, insane and starving. Early missionaries and settlers reported real encounters. These stories often blurred mental illness and spiritual belief. Like a case in 1878, a Cree trapper named Swift Runner killed and ate his entire family during a harsh winter, despite being near a trading post. He claimed he was possessed by a Wendigo spirit. He was later hung by Canadian authorities. His case is often cited in discussions of Wendigo psychosis. In modern horror depictions, Wendigos have been adapted into modern horror with vivid attack scenarios, such as a Wendigo stalks a town possessing people, transforming them into monstrous, antlered beings. Attacks are brutal and savage, involving dismemberment and ritual-like markings. People trapped in mines become Wendigos after resorting to cannibalism. The Wendigos attack with speed and supernatural stealth, but can't see, only hear. They say survivors must stay silent and still to avoid detection, and finally, death. Though a common thread seems to be tied to the Wendigo myth, victims are usually isolated or starving. The creature mimics or manipulates emotions. There is an eerie atmosphere or dread before physical contact. And encounters often involve madness or transformation, not just death. And in this file, the Wendigo is so much more. All right. For any new listeners here, a quick refresh of the history of this podcast. Project Black Garden isn't just a paranormal podcast, it's more of an archive. It's built around a chilling premise. After my father's death, I inherited a collection of classified journals, tapes, field reports, and sealed documents. Records tied to a covert military unit that investigated creatures the world insists do not exist. My great-uncle Sam was in charge of that team, and these files belong to him. Each file is designated by another flower, hence the Lotus files. And every so often, I stumble across an actual personal journal from my great-uncle. And this so happens to be one of those files. It was in a small, fake leather, little handheld notebook. And I think it was for a possible manuscript that he had hoped to maybe put together one day. I don't know why he didn't, but after reading most of these files, the public would have a hard time digesting them, let alone believing a book. So, in my great-uncle's own words, this is his personal experience with a horrifying Wendigo. The snow started the moment we crossed into the tree line. Not soft, not romantic. It came down in thin, cutting sheets that erased our footprints as fast as we made them. Montana swallowed sound, swallowed sky, swallowed everything except the feeling that we weren't alone. This was supposed to be our honeymoon. I promised Amy that we would have the time of our lives. I told myself that again as I adjusted my pack and scanned the tree line. Old habits don't die when you leave your military team, even if it's just for a planned romantic rendezvous/honeymoon. Old habits, they're always there. They just wait. My name is Sam. I've led my men through deserts and mountains and underground dwellings that people wouldn't believe are real. I've survived mortar fire, ambushes, firefights, and impossible missions with the worst creatures imaginable. And I have the scars to prove it. But nothing in Afghanistan or those other places ever felt like these woods. Amy said from behind me, "Sam, you promised no soldier mode," she said, half laughing and half annoyed. I smiled because she deserved that version of me. "I'm good," I told her. But deep down, I wasn't. The cabin sat miles from the nearest road. No signal, no neighbors. Just trees packed tight like prison bars, and snow thick enough to muffle any and all screams. The first scream came after midnight. We had spent the evening eating, laughing, dancing, and doing everything newlyweds do on their first night officially together. But that scream, it dragged through the trees like something being pulled apart. Long, warped, almost human. Amy bolted upright. "Sam, what is that?" I was already on my feet, at attention, ready for the worst. My hand went to my hip before I remembered I wasn't armed. Stupid of me. I mumbled, "Elk." I said it on autopilot, and even I didn't believe me. But I've heard elk. I've also heard men die, and I've seen them die as well. But I've heard elk, and I've heard many other creatures, and I've heard men die too. And that scream wasn't either of those. That was all, and we managed. As the forest went silent again, we managed to fall asleep, uneasily, but still happy and in love. But the next morning, we found tracks circling the cabin. They were footprints. No boots, no shoes, just bare. But they were too long, too deep. The toes stretched out unnaturally, like whatever made them had joints bending wrong. They weren't frozen in place. They were fresh. Amy grabbed my hand. Tell me that's a joke. I didn't answer. I just started checking the perimeter. She knew me better than that, and if I was known for one thing, it was for not having a sense of humor. That's when I smelled it. Rot. Old blood. Like cold iron. I hated that smell. I knew it too well. It clung to the air like a warning. The second night, the whispers started. First, my name, soft and desperate. Sam. It came from the trees ahead of us while we gathered firewood. Amy squeezed my arm. You hear that too? Unbelievably, the voice sounded like her, but it wasn't. Sam, how can that be me? I'm right here. The forest answered, and her voice again, this time farther out. Sam, help me. Every nerve in my body lit up. My training screamed at me not to follow a sound without a source, not to split from your partner, not to chase paranormal bait. But the scream that followed wasn't human anymore. Slowly, it stepped out from behind the pines, like something unfolding from a shadow. It was tall, emaciated, antlers clawing at the sky. Its skin looked stretched over bone that didn't fit. Its mouth split open too wide, and its eyes, oh my God, its eyes were empty and starving. Amy ran. I couldn't blame her, because I ran too. But I stayed behind her, shoving her forward through snow that suddenly felt waist deep. The thing moved with impossible speed, silent despite its size. It didn't charge. It was as if it was stalking us, like it wanted us afraid. Branches snapped above us, and the snow rained down. That's when the whispering started again. This time, it was in my voice. Amy, over here. She faltered, not sure what to make of it. I grabbed her shoulders. Don't listen. Don't you dare listen to that. Suddenly, we hit a ravine with nowhere left to go. My only option was to stand our ground. I turned to face it. Now, I've been in firefights where time slowed, and this was the worst, because I couldn't understand what I was fighting. It wasn't rage in its eyes. It was hunger. Hunger for us. Or hungry for something inside of us. I couldn't tell which. Immediately, it lunged. I swung the flare from my emergency kit, and it cracked across its chest. Fire erupted in red light, and it shrieked. A sound that felt like it tore through my skull. Like the most vicious migraine I've ever experienced. But I didn't stop. I shoved the flare into its face. It recoiled, smoke curling off its skin, retreating into the trees behind it like it was part of them. And then in a blink of an eye, it was gone. We had survived. At least that's the word people use, survive. But survival has layers. We drove back to town the next morning without speaking. We never reported it, never tried to explain what happened. I mean, what would we say? That something ancient hunted us and mimicked our voices? As the days went on, Amy stopped sleeping. I started waking up, reaching for weapons that weren't there. A side effect I hadn't experienced since I first joined the squad. Amy didn't seem to trust me anymore, and she suggested that I changed in those woods. The truth is, I didn't change. The woods peeled me open and showed her who I already was. I couldn't turn off the scanning, searching for the worst in every situation, being more prepared than anyone else in the room. I couldn't stop listening for whispers that weren't there. It didn't take her long before she would tell me she wanted the man she married, not the soldier, but I didn't know how to be both. The divorce papers came a year later, quiet, clean. I signed them without a fight. I loved her, but I didn't want to put her through any more of this torture. Some people are built for the unbelievable, and some can't face those monsters for real. Sometimes back in Montana, and every so often I find myself in those very same woods. Same cold air cutting my lungs. Same smell. Same memories. But I'm not afraid anymore. I know what hunts there. I know what it sounds like when it tries to wear your voice. And sometimes, when the snow falls just right, I catch movement between the trees. A tall shadow with antlers, watching, waiting, taunting. But this time, I don't run. I stand still and let it see me. I hope it remembers our last encounter. And I hope it understands what it cost me. It learned something that winter, but so did I. I survived it, and I can survive it again. And the most important lesson I learned that winter was I am stronger alone. All right, gardeners. I hope you enjoyed that file. The personal ones from my great Uncle Sam are always my favorites. Now, instead of the usual update, I thought I would share a listener email that came in not too long ago. It reads as follows. Subject line: I never go back to those woods. Hi, Michael. I've gone back and forth for years about whether this was real or just something my brain twisted over time. But after listening to some of your episodes, I felt sick in a way I haven't felt since I was a kid. I was 10 years old when it happened. My family owned a small cabin near the Montana-Canada border. No neighbors, no cell service, just trees, snow, and quiet that felt too big for a kid. My parents always warned me not to wander too far, but one afternoon I followed what I thought was my dad's voice calling my name from the woods. That's the part that still messes with me, because my dad was inside the cabin the whole time. The voice sounded exactly like him, same tone, same laugh, calling me deeper between the trees. As I walked, everything went quiet. I remember there were no birds, no wind. Realizing I couldn't hear my own footsteps anymore. And that's when I saw it. It was tall, too tall, and thin like it hadn't eaten in years. Its legs bent wrong, like it wasn't meant to walk upright. I couldn't see its face clearly, but I remember the eyes, pale and shining. They watched me like I was already food. It didn't rush me, it just stood there, as if smiling. Then it spoke again, in my dad's voice. I ran, I don't remember how long, I don't remember falling. I only remember screaming until my throat burned, and my mom pulling me into the cabin, locking the door while something moved outside. Then, slow footsteps circling the walls. My parents told me it was a nightmare. They said I must have wandered and scared myself. But that night, we heard scratching on the roof. They sold the cabin the next spring. I'm in my 30s now. I don't camp anymore. I don't hike. And when winter gets too quiet, I still hear my name being called from somewhere, just out of sight. I hate that feeling. Anyways, thanks for telling these stories. Some of us have been carrying them for a long, long time. Sincerely, a listener who still won't answer voices in the woods. Well, listener, thank you for sharing that. If you ever need anything, I'm here, and I want to believe you. So if anybody else out there would like to share any of their experiences or memories, you can reach me on any of my socials. Message me through Instagram, TikTok, X, or good old-fashioned email, pbgharvest@gmail.com. Come back next time when we track down one of the most secretive myths out there, a weapon known by codename Glitch. The government built her, but can they truly stop her? I'm your host, Michael. Thank you for listening to Project Black Garden, a Monsters and Myths podcast. Season 3, The Lotus Files. As always, monsters are real. And whatever you do, don't answer its call.